Thought Bubble Audio.
Look, up in the sky!
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Welcome to Beer with Geeks with Tim and Frank.
Who are you?
I'm Batman.
I am Iron Man.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You're a wizard, Harry.
A couple of guys with a couple of beers and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia.
Make it so, number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Name the dog, Indiana.
Life finds a way.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now sit back and crack open a cold one, because it's time for Beer with Geeks.
It comes in pints?
Shaken, not stirred.
Great Scott!
I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks, where two geeks geek out with beer. I'm Tim, and with me, as always, is my man who stumbles into fireplaces. It's Frank. How are you today?
Oh gosh, I hope not. I have like three different sources.
You have like 12 fireplaces in your house.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I'm using them this winter, so I really hope.
I'm pretty sure you have two in one room. It's what fancy ass mansion do you live in?
Sure, let's go with that. Let's mythologize this into like multiple fireplaces in the same room. And like,
don't you? Man. You have the pellet stove, and then I
have a pellet stove in one room, and then I have a fireplace in another room, and then I got a fireplace downstairs.
Yeah, but the fireplace in one room it's not double sided, right?
Correct. It's not.
It's like, okay, just checking. Yeah, all right.
No.
I think I also put one in my mind. I put one in the same room as the pellet stove.
I see.
Like
I see.
I'd put
that
one,
it was on both sides of that wall. No.
Yeah.
One's in the dining room, one's in the living room.
I had rearranged your house in
a
fancy butt manner. So
fancy butt manner?
Yeah. I didn't want to say the A word. I don't. Children listen to this, right? Even though.
Hold on. No, I thought you were calling my house a manor, like Wayne Manor, a fancy butt manor.
No, B-U-T-T. No.
Oh man. Welcome to Fancy Butt Manor. Can I offer you an order?
That sounds like something the Muppets would like introduce into a movie.
It does. Oh man! Wow. All right, off to a good start. What are you drinking?
Yeah, I was gonna say. I am drinking a Broze Oatmeal Milk Stout.
Ooh.
Yes. I'm excited. It's a 6.5. I've never had it before.
Nice.
But it's getting frosty outside.
Yes.
So it's time to turn over. Oh, that's good. That's good stuff. That is smooth, is what that is.
Nice.
Really smooth.
I do love an oatmeal.
They have a thing on the back. I love when people are clever. So it's Broze, Broze. And it's that time of year, kids. It's totally time to plump up. Don't worry, we're here for you to help you on your way towards putting on that thick winter coat you've always wanted. Tons of bready, roasty, and chocolatey malts, plus some oats and milk sugar are crammed into this thing right here. Yeah, that should do the trick. Drink up.
That sounds amazing.
It is. There's absolutely chocolatey in here. Yeah, there's definitely some. I definitely get the chocolate, the roasted oats. Yeah, but it's all blended together really well. I'm very impressed with this. I'm like, actually, every time I take a sip, it gets a little better. And I've only had 3 sips. 4 now.
Nice.
5, 6. No. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's good. I was going to save this for a little later in the year, into the winter.
Yeah.
Just because because stouts are unless you're Frank, stouts are great for the cold times.
Sure.
And so, but it is freezing here now.
Yeah.
Like we're going down into the teens tonight, and so I am just happy to bulk up a little bit.
Great.
Yeah. What are you drinking?
I am drinking a polar opposite of what you're drinking. I'm drinking a Pilsner. I'm
Wow,
drinking
all right.
a Banded Brewing Pepperell Pilsner. Actually, is they're
Say that 5 times fast, please.
I know, right? Pepperell German style Pils. It is brewed in southern Maine, in Biddeford, Maine, and right the town across from where my wife grew up, actually.
Cool.
Yeah, they have been they are pretty well distributed in much of New England. But this is just a nice, refreshing Pilsner. I've actually been in a little bit of a throughout like October and November, I was in a mood for lighter beers. But as things are getting colder here, this is one of the last ones that I'm going to be enjoying this way before I switch over to my stash of stouts and porters. So it's sort of emptying out the lighter beers, but this one is quite good. So there you go. What are some other things that are considered to be quite good, Tim?
Things that are considered to be quite good, Frank. A nice walk on the beach, good piece of flannel, Niagara Falls, freshly squeezed orange juice, and, of course, Superman 2. Yeah, man. I connected it. I went all the way there.
You did it. It's time for a superhero slapback.
Slapback, baby, slapback.
I swear I will make that theme song. I swear to God.
Slapback, I don't take crap. Slapback. Anyway, we're here to talk about the next entry into Superhero Slapback, which is Superman 2. The last one was Superman 1 because it's the 1970s moving into the 1980s. And guess what? There is not a lot of superhero content out here, people. It is a barren wasteland of superhero content. So we are only working with what we can.
Yeah.
And actively avoiding some other things like Spider-Man, the television show, and the Captain America TV movies.
At this time, on the big screen, Christopher Reeve pretty much cornered the market on superhero movies at this point in history.
Pretty much. And what a job he does. And so I almost didn't rewatch this before doing this movie because I've seen it so many times that I was like, I don't need to watch it again. And I said, it's been a number of years. I should watch it again. And man, do I have feelings?
Yeah, so you texted me that, but
I have feelings.
We always try to keep it pretty. Save it for the show. It's sort of our mantra.
Yes.
Save it for the show. So we don't discuss these things. But you just dropped a hint that you had feelings, and I have been. Like, that was enough to keep me, like, on tenterhooks for the last 24 hours, where I'm like, oh, my God, I need to know what Tim thinks about Superman 2. I need to hear his opinion on it. Because it also had been a few years for me since I last watched it. And all it did for me was sort of reconfirm a few of my opinions on it.
Okay.
I didn't have any new revelations. So I'm just champing at the bit to know what your feelings and opinions were watching it this time around, even if there weren't any shocking revelations.
It's not good, Frank.
It's okay.
It's not a good movie. It's a fine movie. It's like well-ish made, but it's a bad Superman movie. It's an actual horrible representation of this character.
I'm so glad somebody else
I don't know why it's never dawned on me before, but what an awful characterization for Superman, for Clark, for Lois. Lex is the same, Zod's fine, whatever else. But I think people are like, oh, Superman 2, because there's actually a fight scene between superpowered people. But it is a complete mischaracterization of everything that they stand for. Mm-hmm. And the logic of how you can go from almost like a pitch perfect understanding of Superman in the first film to a complete demolishment of that same exact character with those same exact actors. A mere movie later, parts of it were filmed by the very same person.
Yes.
And so that is just, it was just wild to me. As I was watching, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And this stuff that I like, some stuff that's obvious, like the super kiss at the end. I'm not talking that stuff like rando powers that like don't exist, or cellophane S's, or like that stuff. I'm talking about Lois and Superman's conversation in the Fortress of Solitude, where she's like, blah blah blah, do you find it hard to be Clark Kent? And he's like, oh, him. Like, he's like, no, I quite like Clark, blah, blah, blah. And in my mind, I'm like, you are Clark Kent. And he says, like, I'm really both of them. Like, but you're not. You just said you weren't. Like, he's not your real person. And that's a fundamental misunderstanding of Superman, because Superman is not, like, the real person. Clark is the real person, and he just puts on a costume. Like, there actually isn't really a difference between them. People think that there is, but Clark is the same person in a tie as he is in a cape. He just doesn't wear glasses, but he still cares about the same thing. He pretty much still acts the same way. And as much as I love Reeves' bumbling Kent and how much it works in the first film, it actually doesn't work at all in the second movie. Anyway, you talk, because then it will force me to like come up with the other things that I have to say. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk for 20 minutes.
I just want to like hallelujah preach, like everything you just said. I actually very much agree with. So I think this is one of those films that I think a lot of people, we often, Tim, you and I often, as kids of the 90s, we often say, if this movie came out in 1999 or in 2000, we would have loved this movie.
Yeah,
but
1995 is the go-to,
right?
Is the go-to year.
Okay,
yeah.
But today in 2021, or here today in the 2020s, it doesn't really hold up. I think that the same is true of this came out in 1980. If this came out, if this movie came out today, it would be terrible. But for people back then, it was like, oh my gosh, it is a glass of water for people in a glass of ice water for people in hell. Like, oh my god, it's a superhero movie, and it's Superman, and he's punching, and he's with General Zod and Lex Luthor on the screen at the same time. That is, I think, what a lot of people and people who grew up with this movie will not agree with this opinion, and that's okay. But I do think that there was a lot of nostalgia that people bring to it. I think that there's lots to like about it.
There's a nostalgia that I bring to it.
Right.
Like, I mean, I've said forever almost like that Superman. I like Superman 1 more than Superman 2.
Yes.
I think it's a better constructed movie. And even as a younger kid, not understanding how narratives are put together, how films are made, I got that on a subconscious level. Superman 1 is a better film. Yeah, he doesn't punch anybody, but that's not what makes that's not what makes or breaks a Superman film. And so, please continue from that point on. I just needed to put that.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree with that as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of nostalgia that gets brought to it, and so these movies are held up to this mythological standard of like the gold standard of superhero filmmaking. But I do think that they have some legitimate issues in the way that they portray some of the characters. Here's the thing. Superman 1 was directed by Richard Donner, legendary Richard Donner. Tim, what was his whole philosophy boiled down to one word of
verisimilitude?
Verisimilitude, right? It should a word that literally means it should mirror real life. It should look like real life. It should be similar to the truth. The truth, right? So that was his philosophy. At the end of making Superman 1, he had shot enough to make about, I think, 50 to 75% of Superman 2 already. The producers did a whole thing where they were trying to squeeze 2 movies out of one production and only pay the actors for one. It's a whole thing. Look it up. But they didn't get along with him. He walked after the first movie. When the second movie, when the first movie was released and was a hit, they let him go, I believe. And they brought on Richard Lester. Richard Lester had worked with him. These producers had worked with him on the Three Musketeers. Three Musketeers films,
which has a wildly good cast. It's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah,
it's not a great movie, but it's on Prime. But the cast is unbelievably good. Michael York, Christopher Lee, Oliver. Oh my God, not Oliver Platt. That's the '90s one. I'll think it'll be in my brain later, and I'll come back to it. No, sir. No, it's not him. Yeah.
Wrong guy.
Keep going.
So Richard Lester, he made the Three Musketeers films. He made famously the Beatles films, Help and A Hard Day's Night, that I love so much. He was not a comic book guy. He was not. Richard Donner had been a huge Superman fan and felt very, very passionately about making Superman the movie. Richard Lester did not have a connection to Superman and was exploring the character for the first time. And he stumbled on this thing of, wow, it's interesting how Superman is sort of in the Golden and Silver Age comics is sort of the real character, and Clark Kent is the identity he puts on. Let's play with that a little bit more. He is more of a quirky, surrealist filmmaker at his core. He likes a little bit more surrealism, and he found ways to get little stabs of that in this movie with like comic booky moments of like a funny reaction on someone's face or slapsticky comedy. That's sort of that's how he got that surrealism in there a little bit. But he takes a very different approach to Superman, where he thinks of Superman as the main character and Clark as the disguise. He thinks of it as, this is a comic book. It should be silly. There should be some more slapstick. There should be maybe less plausible, but like, funny situations. Kind of throws the whole verisimilitude thing out the window. Plus, he reshoots half the movie because in order under DGA rules to get credit for being directed by Richard Lester, he had to reshoot stuff that was already shot. So only 25% of Donner's vision exists in the theatrical cut of the movie. So
you can pretty much see what's Donner stuff too, and a lot of it is the stuff at the beginning.
It is,
the Eiffel Tower and the terrorist attack, because like that Superman and that Lois Lane feels completely authentic.
Yes,
Lois being like getting into trouble, doing her thing, and then being like, oh, how do I get myself into this mess? She's not whimpering or cowering or lovesick or anything like that. She is still just as fierce as she ever is. And Superman is still just as calm and cool and collected.
That's Donner. And then when they're at the diner the first time, that's Donner when he finds out about what's happening outside in the outside world. And there's one more sequence as well that it's escaping me at the moment, but there's only like 3 sequences that much of which is Donner. Oh, some reaction shots of when they come to when the Zod or Zanon come to the Daily Planet. That's Donner. All the Gene Hackman stuff is Donner because Hackman refused to, out of loyalty to Richard Donner, wouldn't come back for reshoots under Richard Lester. So anything with Gene Hackman is I was going to say the beginning feels quite like Donner, like the escape from prison and everything.
The
first act is pretty intact,
pretty much Donner.
For what he wanted. A lot of stuff was later reshot. Some scenes had been shot and just were reshot the same. Marlon Brando was supposed to be in the original cut of the movie, and he was removed. That's a whole other thing too. These movies are like just soaked in lore and soaked in so much like behind the scenes, like backstabby stuff. Where, they were mad.
It's a miracle they got made.
It is really a miracle they got made. Yeah, they were mad at Brando because he had
worn his Rolex on the set of the first.
Well, there was that. Yes, but no, he had gotten negotiated for a cut of the proceeds of the gross from Superman the movie, and so they weren't going to put him in the second movie and have him get paid even more and own a percentage of the second movie as well.
Right, well, that's their fault for saying yes to that agreement.
It was a whole thing. It was a whole thing.
Anyway, we're getting away from the track of Superman
2. So if it feels all over the place, it's because 2 different directors took it in 2 different directions. Very different directions. And that's before we get to Cellophane S's and why is there so much Coca-Cola branding and all that stuff.
Right. It's got third act issues, Frank.
Like in a big way.
Pacing issues all over the place, like
characterization issues.
Characterization, like none of it feels authentic to characters. Now, and I'm talking like Superman 1 is still outdated in its own way. Like, like there's a lot of Superman 1 that doesn't hold true to the Superman of 2021 anymore.
Okay,
like it's just like just the way that Clark interacts with Lois, or the over bumblingness of it, turning back having the ability to turn back time, like stuff like that. It doesn't work anymore. But I can forgive stuff like that because embodying the essence of Superman.
Yeah.
And whereas I think he does when he doesn't have to speak some of the dialogue in this movie, but I think the choices that Clark makes and Superman make in this movie just don't feel right. So so Lois finds out the truth, not from herself, but from an accident, which is dumb. Because the previous scene, she just jumped over all this stuff, jumped through the falls, and he's like, "Oh, Lois," and he's got to go save her and all this stuff. So Clark just tripping into the fireplace. One, not something Superman does. Superman doesn't trip. What is that nonsense? And then he's all mad about it, and he's like, "Oh, I wish I hadn't told you." Except that he is always trying to tell her. He just doesn't know how to do it. Yeah, and that's no good. None of that's good. So, but then, so they have this conversation in the fortress where he's like, "Oh, it makes sense to me. I'm both people." Blah blah blah. And Lois is only in love with Superman, and that's a huge problem. She doesn't love Clark. She doesn't like Clark pretty much at all. She barely tolerates him as a human being.
She's straight up when she is when he fakes his way into convincing her that he's not Superman at Niagara Falls. She's like, "Oh, I was so stupid to ever think that someone like you could be like." She's straight up nasty to mean to him. Of to think that someone like you could be Superman. You're a piece of trash. How could you be? She's just mean to him.
Yep. Mm-hmm. All the time.
To the point where I have never quite been convinced of why do you like her in these movies? I'm always like,
Never.
why does he like her? She's not nice to him.
Nope.
It makes sense when you're a kid, and you're to a point. It makes sense when you're a kid, and you're like, oh, well, it's because she's the girl and he's the hero of the story, and so he has to be in love with her. That's it. It's because their names are Clark Kent and Lois Lane. It makes sense, but
that's
apart
correct.
from that,
only works because the script says that they are supposed to, but they don't. They're not compatible characters.
Especially when then in Superman 3 we're gonna meet Lana, and it's so you have this very nice person who is into you, and then but you're like, nope, Lois. That's
Lois. This girl is mean to me. Yeah,
actively mean to me.
Now you've got this bully victim thing going on. I'm the invincible, so I like that she bullies me. And you're I don't want to even read into that. That's a whole weird dynamic I'm not prepared for.
It's just you deserve better, Clark. You deserve better.
Yeah. And so anyways, so he goes from this conversation to blah blah blah. It makes sense to me, and then he moves right to talking to his mom, where she's like,
"This
well,
is
you've got
it
to give up
forever."
your powers, obviously, because and you're like, why? There's no actual reason for him to give up his powers. It's just because the crystal said so at that moment, but they don't hold a sway over his life, and he doesn't need to ask their permission. It's not like his powers will disappear at sunset if he doesn't do this. There's nothing like that. He's just like, oh, well, the crystal said I have to give up my powers. No, you do not.
And also, can I just stress, it's been 5 minutes. And you're like, nope, this is it for life. We're together for life.
All right, stage 5 clear, Clark.
Whoa,
it's fine. Don't even
at
worry
least
about
wait
it.
till there's a ring, man. What?
Yeah. And then, but he doesn't even think through the process, because Superman is about, the whole point of the arc of Superman 1 is to do something beyond yourself. I'm here for, son, you are here for a reason. And 5 minutes with Lois finding out and them having dinner, he's like, sorry, Pa, I don't care about that reason. I don't care about the people. It's just, he's just it's all about Lois. And it is the lesson of his selfishness. That's what he's learning about. No,
yes,
I actually have to do this. But then there's no actual reward for his selflessness at the end. He sorry, Mr. President, I'm sorry that I was gone for so long, a day, barely. And then, and that won't happen again because I learned my lesson. But there's no actual lesson to learn because nobody actually would enforce this arbitrary rule that has been made up that you can't have your powers.
Right. Yeah.
It's just bogus reasoning. It's just, yeah.
It doesn't really, it doesn't really hold together. Like there's not a progression of events that make it clear as to why this has to happen this way. It just sort of is established real quick, and then now we're just dealing with the fallout of that.
Speaking of that, the Kryptonians,
yes,
like their goals are relatively normal for supervillains of some kind. Like they wanted to control Krypton,
world domination,
and now they're on the planet Houston, and so now they're like, okay, let's control this one. But that's not like Zod isn't really interested in anything for a long time, and it's Ursa that's like, we should really show them what we can do, and he's like, meh,
I guess.
Like, why? I guess. Fine. And he's like, whoa, what about Superman? That sounds interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I should explore that concept more. Goes to bookshop, buys Nietzsche. It
does. As soon as they find out that Superman is the son of Jor-El, though, then it makes sense.
Then it clicks in,
because he does say like, let's get revenge on the son of our jailer.
Yes, that clicks through to the first movie, right? You were about to harm me for me, Jor-El.
Yes,
get a day. That all fits fine, but it's messy getting there.
Yes,
and then they don't even confront each other until the final 30 minutes of the film.
It really is the final 30 minutes. Yeah,
I know. I looked
too.
Yeah, and I was like, there's only half an hour of this movie left, and they fight in Metropolis, which is actually still pretty good considering it's 1980. Good. Yeah,
and the effects don't really hold up, but it still is like it's still a good watch.
It's a good watch. It's fine for what it is.
Yeah.
And Ursa throws her voice several times,
Superman.
which is a superpower that we didn't know about. And that's all fine, and then at the end he just kills them. Like
he just kills them.
Yeah, and everyone's cool about it.
Yep,
which is really weird.
Actually, to be more, I paid very close attention this time. He straight up kills Zod. He murders Zod.
Yep. Unless there's a big bouncy marshmallow at the bottom of that of mist, which I don't think so.
Or a portal to the Phantom Zone. I don't think so.
Yep.
And then Non just dies because
kills
he's
himself.
Dumb.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
He jumps trying to fly, and then Lois just murders Ursa.
Yep.
Just pushes her off a cliff.
Straight up murders her.
So yeah, no, we had the two protagonists of the movie just commit murder
in front of Lex Luthor, greatest criminal mind of our time.
Yeah.
But it turns out greatest criminals of their time is Clark and Lois.
Turns out. Yeah.
Turns out. Yeah, studies show.
Yeah, Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well,
but it's
Bonnie
fine
and
because
Clark, am I right?
Oh, there you go. But she's not going to remember she committed murder because she's going to get her mind wiped by a kiss because that's the thing he can do.
Yeah. You know what? And that is egregious on many levels.
Yeah.
Now in 2021,
Yes.
not even just the mere dumbness.
There's layers to how egregious it is.
Oh my God, that's like it's so bad. It's so bad, and I don't really want to talk about that. I don't want to get into that here, but I think we all could look at that and be like, "That ain't right.
That's not right." Especially if then Superman Returns is supposed to happen right after this movie.
Yeah,
and
one of my problems with Superman Returns is that it like weirdly
Right.
legitimizes a lot of the mistakes of Superman 2.
Yes.
And I like Superman Returns, I think, now that I have to question going back and watching these movies.
Well, we're about 26 years away from that in the timeline of Slapback, but we'll get there, I guess.
Gosh. Yeah, no, we'll get there.
We'll get there,
we got to roll through these a little more quickly.
Yeah. Well, once we get out of the era where it's just Christopher Reeve Superman movies, then it might be a little bit.
Yeah, and now we're like dragging our feet, like Superman 3. Dang it,
because we don't want to space it out a little bit, right? Like, but then once it gets into when there's more stuff happening, there's more movies, and there's not just the same actors over and over again, it'll get easier. But so like that's huge problems with that. One thing this movie does very well, I think, that not a lot of Superman films, certainly, and not a lot of Superman properties really spend a ton of time with. It's very cliche to go to the, all right, so here's Superman, what's his weakness, right? Because in Superman the movie, we find kryptonite. Lex uses that, like that's classic Superman, but also it can be overdone. But the other weakness, the weakness that Zod and Ursa and Non find, is that he will do anything to protect humanity. That's why he shouts, "The people."
The people. I mean, he will if he has his powers, which he is clearly ready to give up at a moment's notice.
He is, but that's sort of that is the lesson that he learns, right? And you alluded to it earlier. That's
right. And that lesson works better for some superheroes than it does for others.
That's right. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So it makes narrative sense that he makes the mistake. And then he reverses it and he's learned his lesson, which is, the people. And that whole third act fight sequence is his
reclamation of his values.
It is.
Right.
It is. And it's the villains dangling the city in front of him as like, well, we'll destroy the city because that's your weakness. Like that. Mm-hmm. They are using that to get to him. Because they identify that as a soft spot for him.
Correct. So there's actually quite a bit of him saving people in this sequence. It's not a lot of he punches them and there's some heat vision or whatever, but a lot of it is got to save the people on the bus, got to save the people in the car.
That's right.
Save the people on the thing, got to save the people over here, and that's what works about this Superman when he's in action. It's about the Eiffel Tower, got to save people.
Yes.
In the city, got to save people. Like that's
his whole thing. That's his whole thing. So that's I will say that's one thing that that it does very well. But on the whole, I don't think I don't think it really is nearly as good as Superman the movie, and I put that largely at the feet of Richard Lester, again, a director whose movies I really, really love. But I just don't think he was the right person because he doesn't have an affinity for this character. He looked at Silver Age comics where every week Superman had another arbitrary made up power. He can turn into a turtle. He can send a little mini Superman out of his hands. He can, whatever. He can, literally, there is an issue where he can slow us and wipes her memory. Yep. So he's basing it on the Silver Age, on an entirely different style of Superman storytelling than completely different to even what was happening in the comics at that time. Yep. Yeah, contemporary with him at that time in the comics. So it's like. It's telling a very different version of the character that was already outdated by the time he was telling it. Because he was sort of playing catch up on at that point 50 years or 40 years of the character.
But he was trying to tell a different version of the. You know what it is? It's the Joel Schumacher issue.
Yeah,
where I'm working under the same. It's like it's more like Forever to Batman and Robin than Burton to Schumacher, but it's like I'm working under the same aesthetic that actually doesn't really match the tone of what like the absurdist tone that I'm using, and so there's a disparity between what I'm supposed to be watching. Or what I am visualizing versus the story is telling me.
Yes.
And that does not work at all. Speaking of things that don't work, I don't think the Kryptonian outfits are great.
Yeah.
They're almost like traditionally alien. Also, didn't really know that they have red piping on all of their stuff until I watched it in high def in there in the sun. And I was like, hey, look at all that red. Zod's actually in red and black. That's awesome. Like, that I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Terrence Stamp is great. I mean, he's so hammy.
He is, but he should be.
He should be. I agree. And it's fun. It's not real, but it's fun.
It's fun. Right. I must say I like Sarah Douglas's Ursa more this time around than I ever had before. And I was just really appreciating Gene Hackman's Zod. I think this is a better. I'm sorry, Gene Hackman's Lex, obviously. I kind of think I like Lex better in this movie than in Superman the movie, like his performance.
He's slightly more menacing in this film, and that's not a lot. Like, he's really not menacing at all.
No,
but he's all over the place in Superman the movie. And he's pretty directed in this film. He's like, I've done time, but this is what I'm after. And he's still fun about it. He's like, Casa de Lex, or, like Australia.
Yeah, Australia.
That's all good. But you're right. I think it's the minimal amount of screen time. Like, he doesn't actually have time to be weird. But I also appreciated it more this time. Over the years, I'm beginning to appreciate the more, not zany Lex Luthor, but maybe the more slightly aggravated, I don't know what the mad genius Lex Luthor.
Genius. Okay, yeah.
Instead of the 80s politician businessman Lex Luthor,
I agree.
Which is what I'm very much used to and grew up with. And there's a harmony between the two of them, certainly, but there's the mad genius of Lex Luthor can be quite fun if done correctly. And he's pretty fun.
Yeah, I think there's more storytelling potential, honestly, with that mad genius style of Lex Luthor rather than just the I'm an evil billionaire. An unethical businessman is one thing, but we have those in real life. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The mad genius that you see on the comic book page or in the animated series that we grew up with, that is, or even John Cryer's take, honestly.
John Cryer's is probably it is the most blended Lex Luthor that I've come across.
I think that's true.
In live action medium, he's cruel, conniving, 10 steps ahead of everybody else, but he's also weirdly fun.
Yeah.
He's clearly having fun. And I think Gene Hackman's Lex is having fun
in this
as the greatest criminal mind of all time.
In this movie, he's definitely having fun. And it's because he's constantly back on his heels because every 10 seconds Zod's about to kill him and then he has to give up another piece of information to earn his place. And there's something kind of fun about that cat and mouse game that's going on between them.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it's fun to watch him use his brain to get out of these problems repeatedly. He gets angry, he gets flustered, and then he says, but you need me because I can tell you where he lives, or I can tell you this, or I can tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
And he does that multiple times, and it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch him use his wits to stay ahead. And I'll say this too. Ultimately, right before Superman and Lois murder a bunch of people, he uses his brain, when he fake confides in Lex, okay, I'm going to go, put them in this booth and then we can take away their powers, because he knows that Lex is going to tell.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
So he uses that. He uses his intelligence as a weapon in that situation where he knows Lex is going to tell and that he's going to be able to put himself in the chamber and protect himself from the red sun rays.
I actually like that quite a bit. And the only thing that I actually can get really behind with Clark giving up his powers in 5 minutes of Lois being oh, so you're both people. Interesting. Is the or the parallel between those two scenes. And so the tension is there for the audience as well as the characters, right? Because we know what it looks like when this chamber already works, but we see it different. We see the lights on the outside, but they don't know that.
Yes,
I just like that.
I like that.
I like the subtlety of that moment,
right?
It's
like Luke in the Last Jedi, his beard being a different color, and it's wait a second, am I supposed to notice that? Because I feel like I'm noticing a difference here, but they're not acknowledging it.
You had time to go to Supercuts, did you, Luke?
Right. Same thing. It's wait, weren't the lights on the inside of the booth last time? It's the same sort of feeling of something's different here. I'm picking up on something being different here. Am I finding a mistake, or is this significant? And it turns out to be significant. Tim, I know we're over time, but I have just two more things I want to say about this movie, just because they're on my mind, and I know a lot about these movies, and while we're talking about them, I want to say what I have to say.
I understand. When we get to the 90s Batman movies, you're gonna have to deal with me.
So, please, totally. Yeah. I will be. Yeah, the shoe will be on the other foot then. But so have you seen the Donner cut?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
There's some great stuff in there.
There's some really good stuff in there. You mentioned before how lame it is, and I agree how lame it is that Lois finds out ultimately his secret because he trips and falls, right?
But the original
in the Donner cut
is wonderful.
Oh yeah, and so the version what they use in the Donner cut is actually screen test footage, but it was, I mean, these were real sides. These were real pages from what would have been the script, or at least close to it, where she pulls a gun on him and fires at him, and he's like, well, jig is up. You shot at me and I'm not dead, so you must know I'm Superman. And she's like, haha, they were blanks. So she does outsmart him into telling her the truth, which I love that. I love that it's her using her brain and not just him falling into a fire.
Yep.
So I enjoy that. And like, that's the thing where Richard Lester wanted to just make it zany and silly. So what if they were at this weird honeymoon suite with this sleazy bellhop, you know, like that was just so he could get his surrealism and comedy beats in there.
I did enjoy the bed vibrating when Clark sits on it, though. He was like, oh.
So funny. I mean, he was so funny with that stuff.
He was.
So that's one thing, is that I thought that was way better in the Donner cut. And the other thing is at the end, so like, I'm not on board with Superman killing at the end of that movie. When people point to that and they're like, oh, well, you don't, you know, I famously am not crazy about him snapping Zod's neck at the end of Man of Steel. And folks will say, oh, well,
what?
Yeah, brand new information. Folks will then say like, well, the Superman 2, he kills them in Superman 2. And I'm like, yeah, and it's wrong there too.
Yeah.
And
I'm still not happy about it.
Somehow that doesn't compute for folks. Well, there is a TV cut of this film that was only shown a handful of times where the Arctic police come and arrest Zod, Ursa, and Non and take them away in a police car.
That's
like an
the
armored
surrealist
car.
ending I'm waiting on.
And that
like,
was
what?
the made-for-TV ending because it was too dark to show in primetime Superman killing the villains.
Which
so they
means
shot
that he
a whole
really did
alternate
kill Zod, and there is no marshmallow bouncy house at the bottom of that mist.
Exactly. So they knew this, and they shot an alternate ending where you see them get into like an armored truck that says like Arctic Police, whatever that is, and they just get carted away. And so I think it was shown on like ABC or something a handful of times throughout the 80s. With this alternate cut that had that alternate ending. So
that's better. That's my chosen ending.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better than him. Okay, so here's the thing. So if you have to compare, so we'll end with this. But so if you have to compare the two Superman murdering Zod things, like Superman murdering a fully powered Zod while that Zod is attempting to kill people is actually better than Superman killing a completely depowered Zod who cannot defend himself against the most powerful figure in the galaxy.
Yeah.
And just shoving him off or like throwing him down a cliff. That's worse. That's actually worse. Because Zod, without his powers, is actually quite not very much a threat to you. Like, at all. So now you're just being malicious. Kind of like going back to that diner and beating up that guy.
Yes.
You're actually you're just being malicious.
Yes, which was another... the original diner scene was shot by Donner. The revenge scene was shot by Lester. Because he felt like it needed
the
closure.
First scene. That's important, because he's never had that experience before. It's a real rude awakening that he needed. If he can't even defend Lois in the diner or himself, never mind Lois, he can't defend himself, how is he supposed to protect all these people that actually need him? That's a very powerful scene if read correctly.
Yes.
Him destroying the property of somebody else all over again, no good. No good.
Yeah.
Although he does pay for it.
He does, which is the only saving grace there. But there's still
getting it redone again.
Yeah,
that's like the whole thing.
It's not cool. But it's like slapsticky, right? Because like he slides the guy down the bar and the whole thing, and that's Lester's style. Is that sort of slapsticky, comedic, surrealist. And he thought like, well, this is a comic book movie. It needs more of that. He also thought that the shots should be fairly static and that the camera shouldn't move much because in a comic book, it's a panel, it's a 2D illustration. So a lot of his stuff is shot in that way where the camera is very static. There's not a lot of movement in the camera itself. It's meant to be a static frame and that the characters move around within the frame, but it's a mostly static frame, which is an interesting idea theoretically, and it has sort of a
theoretically. Theoretically,
yeah. on paper, it's an interesting idea.
If the characters are moving and the frame isn't changing, that's actually not comics. It would be multiple frames with characters within those, so that when the characters move, the frame or the panel changes. That's actually more akin to a comic book than like characters moving within the single frame that doesn't move. That's laziness.
Yeah, but he was experimenting and he thought he was doing something artsy and closer to comics than
I understand I understand the logic, but I think he actually got further removed from comics.
I would agree. Yeah. Like in practice, it didn't actually turn out the way that he thought it would.
No, because it's actually kind of dull.
Because he didn't really know comics either. Like that's the thing. Like he thought he was imitating comics, but it's somebody who doesn't really know comics trying to imitate a thing they don't know that well. Kind of like it's a guy who doesn't know Superman trying to am I doing it right? Like, no, not really.
Yeah,
not really. You make great movies, but this is not really your area of expertise.
You can't have a win all the time, but
right. And then he made Superman 3.
Oh, Richard Lester also did Superman 3.
That's why the whole opening credit sequence is just slapstick city.
That's so unfortunate. I haven't seen Superman 3 since I was a little kid because I am still scared of the ending.
Yeah,
so,
fair. Well, the end credits of this movie said coming soon, Superman 3. So,
man, actually, I did like that the opening credits showed Superman 1 all over again.
Mm-hmm.
In case you missed it.
Yes.
Here's what happened. Yes. I enjoyed that because it's pre-release of home video release.
Right.
Like this is before you could just watch whatever you wanted at home. So like you might not have had the chance to see Superman 1. So I'm going to give you the really brief version right now.
Especially because the whole thing with the three villains, it was meant to be one big movie.
Some context.
So they had to give you context.
I enjoyed that quite a bit. I wish more sequels did that.
Yeah.
Remind me of what happened in the last one.
It's like the previously page at the beginning of the comic, right? That sort of recaps for you like what's been happening.
Yeah. Or TV show previously on whatever Arrow.
Yeah.
Whatever.
My name is Kara Zor-El.
Yeah, right. Although that's just the intro. That's not the previously on.
Right.
And it's different. Anyway, we're just rambling now, Frank. Where can the people find us?
You can find us rambling at beerwithgeeks.com, thoughtbubbleaudio.com. You can support all the shows on the Thought Bubble Audio Network at patreon.com/thoughtbubbleaudio. For as little as $1 a month, you can keep these shows on the air, coming to your feeds every single week. You can subscribe and rate and review us anywhere podcasts are found. You're probably listening to us in one of those apps right now. And if you are, thank you very much. We'd appreciate a rating, a review, or if you don't subscribe, to go ahead and subscribe. You can also, you can keep in touch with us at beerwithgeeks@gmail.com or at beerwithgeeks on Twitter.
Very good, Frank. This has been a pleasure talking to you on another exciting segment of Superhero Slapback. And so, until next time,
cheers.